From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. We start in Colombia, where students who were protesting for a higher education budget have been met with heavy police repression. Riot police reportedly attacked protesters with tear gas, canisters, batons, and even their fists. The students had been demonstrating throughout the day. They were joined by indigenous groups and worker unions who are against President Duque's tax reform, which seeks to tax basic goods. Indigenous groups from Colombia's Chocó department are also protesting against high levels of violence in their war-torn region. Over 400 members of the region's indigenous communities gathering in front of the Ombudsman office in Bogota. The protesters are demanding for an audience with President Iván Duque to address the violence affecting their community.
The city of Bogota has received a delegation of Embera sisters and brothers for the past 3 days, totaling 450 people. They seek a direct dialogue with the president and want to explain the issues which led them to march to the city of Bogota.
Our correspondent in Bogota, Jose Manuel Jimenez, has been with the protesters and sent this report.
There have been demonstrations in various cities of Colombia and in different parts of the capital, Bogota. Students at the public universities, indigenous groups, and trade unions are all protesting against, in the first place, the lack of funding for higher education, which makes it difficult for many Colombians to begin or complete their university education. They are also marching against the tax reform, which will affect workers in the poorer sectors, because it will put taxes on basic goods. It's a measure that will really hit those on low incomes and benefit the big companies and bankers. The economy minister, Dr. Carrasquilla, says he won't back down, that there is no plan B, that the measures are essential. But these protesters are taking to the streets to demand immediate measures to overcome their dire economic situation.
Moving on to Honduras, the lawyers and family of murdered indigenous leader Berta Cáceres have condemned the many irregularities during her ongoing murder trial.
The hearings of defendants have been continuously carried out privately, in the absence of Berta Cáceres' family and the legal team. There have also been occasions where hearings have taken place without anyone being notified.
We continue condemning these actions that the public ministry and the court are doing because due process has not been respected. We have always said that we want a trial with guarantees, and it's unbelievable that a trial without legality or legitimacy from the victims is being carried out.
Since the trial began, lawyers and family have spoken out against the irregularities. On top of that, the court is not accepting evidence against the defendants, raising further questions about law and order.
This shows a clear union between the institutions and organized crime. We are speaking of hitmen and of the armed forces. It can be a union with the institutional structure of the government and the state of Honduras.
Berta Cáceres defended the Hualcarque River in the northwest of Honduras from a government decree permitting the construction of a hydroelectric plant. The decision was illegitimate because no referendum was carried with the indigenous people. Rather, it was a deal done behind closed doors between the state and the Desarrollos Energéticos company.
We know the truth. We know who participated and who did not. We know that this murder came from the company DESA and what level of involvement their executive members had.
According to the lawyers of Berta Cáceres, the public ministry and the court have failed to uphold the law and have failed in their responsibility, despite existing evidence showing the defendants were part of the government and later employed by the DESA company.
This man called David Castillo, before being part of this company, was part of the officials of the National Electric Company, specifically linked to this topic.
The verdict is expected soon on the 8 that stand accused of the murder. The family's expectations are low, so they are already planning to raise the case to an international stage.
A young Mapuche was killed by Chile's national police during a raid in his community on Wednesday. Camilo Cartillaga was shot in the head twice by special forces deployed to the area of Temucuicuy. Social organizations and several lawmakers are holding the state responsible for the murder and are demanding an investigation. Meanwhile, hundreds of people protested in Santiago to condemn the ongoing violence against the Mapuche people and what they called their segregation from society. Members of the special forces also shot 3 minors, including a 15-year-old teenager who is in critical condition. This information was confirmed by the Temucuicuy authorities, who added that the minor is being held in the Collipuli police station. According to a community spokesperson, the young man witnessed the murder of Camilo Cartillanca. Chile's social organizations continue to rally in Santiago to demand answers to the government's violent crackdown resulting in the fatalities of indigenous people. They are outraged over the militarization of the Wallmapu region, which has led to the deaths of 16 Mapuches in recent years. Social leaders are calling on citizens to take action against government repression, as well as the continued appropriation of their lands.
Since 1990, we have had many Mapuche deaths across all governments. There is a systematic logic by all sectors of the right wing that sides with landowners and dictates that if a Mapuche does not bend to the will of the state, they will be killed.
We need all unions to call on a mass demonstration across the entire country. We need to fight against the repression the Mapuche face. They must be allowed to be self-governed. Their lands must be demilitarized and the jungle command must be disbanded.
Our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela, brings us more about this case.
Camilo Catrillanca was shot in the head by police forces inside Mapuche territories. According to the Interior Minister, Andrés Chadwick, the police operation was trying to prevent Mapuche community members from committing violent acts. They accused Mapuche people of stealing 3 vehicles from residents of a town nearby. And as a result, they deployed an operation with more than 300 security forces and 2 helicopters to fight over the community of Temucuicuy. Social organizations questioned the real reason behind the operation and made a call to end the criminalization of protest, as well as of police repression and violence against the Mapuche people.
450 campesino families in Brazil face eviction at any moment from the city of Campo do Maio in the state of Minas Gerais. These families say their forced eviction will benefit a coffee grower landowner.
This sugarcane producing plant ceased operating after it became bankrupt in 1996. For 20 years now, it's been occupied by dozens of campesino families. But the owners started a legal process in 2016 so they could lease the land to the agricultural corporation Jodil, owned by well-known coffee producer João Faria, who works directly with companies like Nestlé and Jacobs Douwe Egberts.
He finances this conflict and also finances the lack of resolution for the conflict through other means. He is trying to help the owners of this abandoned factory to recover the land.
A week ago, authorities decreed the eviction of 450 families living there. Sebastião and Lucien are among those who chose to resist and stay put. They grow a number of crops on that land, and in the past it was unusable. Landowner Faria would greatly benefit from their eviction since it would allow him to expand his coffee empire.
He is going to bring many tractors to harvest the coffee, and only a few people will be allowed to work here. The rest will be left unemployed. João Faria is going to create jobs. Everything he buys, everything he invests in comes from outside. So what kind of employment is he going to bring exactly?
The campesino families have invested nearly $6 million in infrastructure and crops. They are responsible for producing over 500 tons of coffee a year. For the landless workers movement, this case won't advance the government's agrarian reform. The eviction of these people from regenerated lands goes hand in hand with the country's policies.
We all understand that all of these measures began with the 2016 coup against former President Dilma Rousseff. They are part of a society that's pushing for conservative ideals that have now consolidated with our new president, Jair Bolsonaro.
Facing the onset of the agribusiness, the ineffective state, and the contradictory decisions of the legal system, these campesinos promised to stand firm and continue producing healthy products, and above all, maintain their dignity.
Hundreds of indigenous people arrived to Ecuador's capital, Quito, this week to urge the National Assembly protect their water reserves. They have marched for 11 days from the Amazonian city of Napo to deliver a proposal to wild protect the region by banning mining. Indigenous people are also calling for bilingual education, the end of the criminalization of their leaders, and an agrarian reform. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, brings us the details of the indigenous march.
Hello, yes, indeed. More than 1,000 indigenous people have marched through Ecuador's capital, Quito, with a clear message: stop mining on indigenous territories. That said, it's not possible that the government and the transnational companies want to keep destroying the forest. The march started on the Ecuadorian Amazon and finished in Quito, where they met with the President of the National Assembly, Elizabeth Cabezas. The main leaders of the indigenous group have submitted a bill against the mining. Also, on the other hand, indigenous groups of women have occupied the hydrocarbons ministry, where they said that they are against the oil companies. They can affect the Yasuni, also with another groups in defense of the environment. They said that it's not possible that the government are not comply with the agreement between these groups and the government. They are also demanded that the government is not clear in their message, so they are started this march with this intention to put clear that they don't want that the oil companies and the mining companies will go to the Amazon. So this is all the information we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
Moving to El Salvador, President Salvador Sánchez Serén has launched a new national policy for indigenous people, a plan that will help a sector of the society that has historically been excluded.
With an ancestral ceremony, the Nahuatl, Pipil, Lenca, and Cacahuira indigenous peoples celebrate the announcement of a public policy that will work to enforce their economic, social, and cultural rights.
This is the starting point to build, little by little, a solid pyramid, so to speak, for our rights. In a special event at the presidential palace, President Salvador Sánchez Serén gave the document to indigenous representatives. This happened after talks with different organizations of indigenous people and state institutions. The policy has strategies to improve social, cultural, economic, and environmental issues.
This is one of the most important legal actions in the history of El Salvador, because it consolidates the end of centuries of exclusion for this noble and brave sector of our country. I express my respect to all indigenous communities and organizations and of their success, a product of their effort and tenacity.
Since June 2014, indigenous people in the country have been officially recognized, and now they are launching programs to revive their language, traditions, and ancestral cultures. The identity of Native people and their link to Mother Earth has influenced strategies for sustainability in the use of natural resources.
I will demand that everyone who was there to receive this document, and to the current and coming governments, to fulfill this policy, not to keep this document in a drawer, because it has taken a lot of sacrifice to get to this point. We've gone hungry for too long.
El Salvador is a multi-ethnic state, and now it has made a compromise to respect and to strengthen cultural diversity and people's rights. For this reason, the intersectional group of indigenous peoples has been created. It will monitor the fulfillment of this national policy.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. A confrontation took place on the streets of Peru's capital, Lima, during opposing demonstrations over gender education reforms. During the march, LGBT activists clashed with protesters from the Catholic Church before they were broken up by the security forces. Critics from the Catholic Church accused authorities of promoting homosexuality. The Senate in Argentina has approved the 2019 budget despite heavy protests. With 45 votes in favor, 24 against, and 1 abstention, senators passed the budget proposed by President Mauricio Macri. After 13 hours of debate, this budget is aimed at maintaining the financial agreement that the government signed with the International Monetary Fund. Nonetheless, Argentines continue to struggle with price hikes and the overall economic crisis. Many believe that these austerity measures are hurting those most vulnerable.
Now, the price of vegetables has increased, fuel prices have increased, the price of transport has increased. Every day the price of something increases and people can't really bear it anymore.
I am not making any money. I am not selling anything. And people notice when you modify the prices a little. They feel like being ripped off. And they are very careful when it comes to buying.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more details.
After 13 hours of debate, the 2019 annual budget was approved in Congress. The budget includes many demands of the International Monetary Fund, as well as the payment of foreign debt. It also includes budget cuts in health, education, culture, and also massive layoffs in the public sector. Trade unions are greatly concerned about this budget and have confirmed they will continue to protest.
We'll take a short break now. More news after this.
We are always there tracking the news. We seek equality. We defend the truth. It's a hard job, but we are not alone. We count on a new ally.
Welcome back. Letters demanding a vote of not confidence are piling up against British Prime Minister Theresa May. Members of her own party are calling for her removal over the Brexit deal. The move comes after 4 members of May's government resigned early Thursday. The backlash also comes just after Cabinet had agreed to support the draft version of the agreement. But the Prime Minister remains defiant in wake of this crisis.
Yes, difficult and sometimes uncomfortable decisions have had to be made. I understand fully that there are some who are unhappy with those compromises. But this deal delivers what people voted for, and it is in the national interest. And we can only secure it if we unite behind the agreement reached in Cabinet yesterday. If we do not move forward with that agreement, nobody can know for sure the consequences that will follow. It would be to take a path of deep and grave uncertainty when the British people just want us to get on with it.
The Arab League has called for a meeting in Cairo, Egypt, to discuss the current crisis in Gaza. The meeting was attended by the organization's permanent representatives. They have demanded that the Israeli military halt its aggression and put an end to the violence immediately, and ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinian resistance factions brokered by Egypt, was reached on Tuesday.
The U.S. administration continued its bias towards the government of the occupation and covering up its crimes and defending it. This is what the U.S. administration does not hesitate to officially disclose by stand against all attempts to condemn aggression and occupation and its practices in violation of international legitimacy resolutions and violations of international law.
The African Union's 20th session of the Executive Council has opened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Chairperson of the Executive Council, Moussa Faki Mahama, said that institutional reform will improve the work of the African Union Commission. The Executive Council session is a preliminary to the African Union Assembly, which runs from November 17 to the 18th. The United States Treasury has imposed sanctions on 17 Saudi nationals accused of killing journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. According to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in addition to these sanctions, his department will continue to investigate the case in order to hold all those responsible. And now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines from around the world.
The Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has called for a collective effort to maintain multilateralism and free trade at this year's Association of Southeast Asian Nations +3 leaders meeting. The meeting took place in Singapore, which is one of the 10 members of ASEAN, and in attendance were 3 of its dialogue partners, China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. Keqiang praised the ASEAN and +3 alliance in tackling the Asian and international financial crisis and insisted it must continue to curb protectionism. The 3 partners are advancing the trilateral free trade agreement negotiations that will contribute to peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Displaced Yemenis living in refugee camps in the northern part of the country have shared their experiences of the war. As fighting between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthi fighters intensifies, nearly 20,000 people have been displaced recently. According to the United Nations, Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian crisis with over 22 million people in need of some form of assistance. 13 million are at risk of dying from starvation.
We were displaced from the district of Sada, but we did not find anything. We did not even find firewood, and there is no food. Our situation is bad. We receive half a bag of flour, which is not enough for displaced families who have 7 or 8 children. How will half a bag of flour and half a can of oil be sufficient for one when we have sick children that we could not find even in a mosquito net?
The Taliban have killed 30 members of the Afghan National Army and local police force in Farah province. Reportedly, the Taliban attacked an outpost late on Wednesday, lasting 4 hours. The district police commander, Abdul Jabbar, was also killed. Security in the area has now been heightened following the attack.
We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.